It's back to school time. This year, Sport Clips Haircuts will send you back in style with the prize package sure to send you straight to the head of the class. Visit sportclips.com/back-to-school for your chance to win. No purchase necessary. Ends August 25th, 2017. Must be 18 or older. Subject to official rules at sportclips.com. Void where prohibited.
This is the best of the Dan Le Batard Show with the Stugotz podcast.
Clinton Yates, all right for the undefeated, filling in here on a Tuesday. Should be a fun one. Got a lot of things planned. Eric Karabell is going to join us. He's an ESPN.com senior writer and fantasy expert at 10:30. In addition to that, my friend Michelle Beadle, host of Sports Nation, is going to come on at 11. And then for those of you who have heard me on these airwaves before, perhaps you've listened to another program I host with Mina Kimes and Dominic Foxworth. It's called The Morning Roast. Comes on Sundays, 9 a.m. to noon. We talk about the Bachelor Nation all the time. Bachelorette, Bachelor, Bachelor in Paradise, whatever you want. I've got what I'm calling a Bachelor Nation surprise at noon. Some of you might have seen the Bachelor in Paradise premiere last night. Paradise! It's right up Mike Ryan's wheelhouse there. A little singing action. It was a fun one. I actually enjoyed it quite a bit. What you don't know is that Bachelor in Paradise is actually the best show of all of those in that franchise. We just came off the season of Bachelorette. First black Bachelorette. That ended awkwardly. But now we're moving into that, and we're good. However, there's obviously a lot more to discuss in terms of what's going on around the nation. We're coming up on football season. I'm currently watching preseason games that I don't care about. I'm reading magazines to try to find out whether or not I'm going to be any good in my fantasy league this year. I had a dream last night. I drafted a white guy who was a wide receiver from New England. I can't remember what his name is. What's the guy's name? Amendola. There's more than one, right?
Yeah. You probably drafted Edelman.
Ooh, I might have drafted Edelman. I can't remember. It was a weird dream, though, because I was like, why am I dreaming about fantasy football?
Did you draft Chris Hogan?
I did not draft Chris Hogan. I would have remembered that, because that's a short name. It was a longer name than that.
So it was either Hogan, Edelman, or Amendola.
It might have been Amendola. What number does Amendola wear?
I want to say 80.
Does Edelman wear like a college football number?
He wears a number in the teens. I think he wears number 11 because he was a college quarterback, so he's eligible for both positions by jersey number.
I heard. Okay, so that's the guy I picked. It was a guy with a low number. But that was just a dream, which is a little strange. Dreaming about fantasy football.
Fantasy on the Fours.
Oh, look at that. It's time for Fantasy on the Fours. 4 minutes into every hour, we give you the fantasy information that you need. At the quarterback position, Matthew Berry, Skins fan, is saying that Carson Wentz is going to be a sleeper pick that you may want to look out for. Matthew also believes that a potential bust at the position this season will be Matthew Stafford. Finally, Matt's breakout star will be running back Joe Mixon. Glee. Fantasy on the Fours. 4 minutes into each hour today during the Fantasy Football Marathon on ESPN Radio. Speaking of that Fantasy Football Marathon, I watched that. Did you watch any of that last night, Mike?
I did not.
I tuned in. I enjoyed it. Because you know what? I like madcap, ridiculous TV. There's something about the production value of having people that they know they're going to have to be on for too long. They know it's going to be a quasi train wreck, and they're still trying to make the best of it that I enjoy.
Here's what I did last year. I also didn't watch it for the first night, and I began watching it just as the wheels started falling off and everybody got really tired at the very end. And to me, it's some of the best television ESPN's ever done. Last year's Fantasy Football Marathon around the very end of the marathon. So I'm hoping to just do the same thing and see everybody crazy-eyed, either wired on coffee and caffeine or just dead tired, because I think that's where the really memorable moments come from.
I tuned in. I saw people playing bags with red Solo cups that were empty. I saw guys throwing those like Pop-A-Shot deals for football. Saw Gojo and Sarah Spain doing their bits that I thought were funny. And then I tuned out. I fell asleep with the TV on, which is probably why I dreamed of drafting Amendola? No, Edelman. I've forgotten already. Anyway, and I woke up this morning to see something that I'm not sure that a lot of people necessarily recognize or will remember if they didn't watch it live. But there was one point in which there was an auction held for a certain amount of players. Now, Mike, I don't play a lot of fantasy football. I've played 2 years, and before that it was 10 years ago, in which all these newfound leagues, at least to my knowledge, were not existent. Please explain to me under what circumstances an auction would be a reasonable bid, outside of the fact that they had to fill 24 hours of programming. What was going on there?
Well, auction drafts are hugely popular. In fact, the vast majority of daily fantasy games are auction style, where you get a cap of, say, $100, and you have to spend that $100 not necessarily evenly, but you have to allocate it to the players that you think make your team best. So you're obviously looking for stuff in the dollar bin for some bargains. Say a quarterback that you think might have a backdoor situation. Maybe Goff might be down 35-0 at the end of the one quarter. So right. You put $1 on Jared Goff, and you hope that he can get you some backdoor points. Meanwhile, you've spent $15 on Julio Jones because he's your main point getter. So auction and salary cap style fantasy games are probably right up there with head-to-head in terms of the most popular because, like I said, daily fantasy sites,
gotcha.
Most of those lean on auction-style drafts.
Well, I got to tell you, when I first saw that, it was very problematic. And not because I'm going to go on some long rant about it, but I just want to explain why the history of auctions when it comes to human bodies is problematic for a large percentage of this country. I know they got to fill a lot of space, and I don't know what happened from a programming standpoint because I only saw a clip this morning on Twitter. But look. How do you think people were moved about this nation at a certain time? And when you've got a visual of a lot of white guys holding up cards of various people, no matter what they look like, that harkens back to something that makes a lot of people uncomfortable. And it happened to be a bad time considering what's going on in various parts of the country in the South. And I've got to say, it didn't feel good to see that this morning.
Well, like I said, I didn't watch it last night. The only clip that I saw that I think you're referring to is a clip in which Odell Beckham Jr. Was put up for auction, and a bunch of fantasy people in the crowd were bidding to have Odell Beckham Jr. on their team. I'm searching for more information on it, whether or not I think context matters. I think if more players were auctioned, that would help too. If this was the only time that they went to it, probably auctioning off Aaron Rodgers might have been a better move. You can tell sort of the intent behind it. They're filling 36 hours of fantasy football programming. They're covering all sorts of fantasy leagues. And for an auction league, you can tell someone said, it would be really funny if we had an auctioneer on there, which in a vacuum I think is a pretty funny and clever idea, trying to give people different visuals and different sorts of styles to execution.
I get that. All I'm saying is,
but when you see the one clip without context, I can certainly understand what you're saying, especially given the rough patch that our country's going through right now.
Yeah, and I'm not trying to throw shade on anyone. I just want people to understand in overall context, not just the context of that bit, but the context of this nation, how that felt to watch this morning. By the way, have you ever been to an auction, Mike, where they had sign language interpreters?
I've never been to an auction, period. I don't live that kind of silky life. Although it doesn't necessarily have to be silky, right? Because a lot of these auctions are foreclosure auctions, and a lot
of these auctions, trust me, ain't nothing silky about sitting in a barn. But anyway, look, if you've ever been and they have a sign language interpreter, make sure you watch the sign language interpreter when the guys actually start moving the actual stuff. Because you know what they do?
They got to be going as fast as the person speaking, right?
Nope. They just do the Johnny Manziel.
Please explain.
The money dance. That's literally all they do.
Really?
Yeah. while the numbers are all turning at an auction with sign language interpreters, that's all they do. The Johnny Manziel.
I got to YouTube this.
It's great. At least that's what happened the one time I saw it, and I'm just going to blindly act as if that's what happens everywhere, but that's what happened a couple times I saw it at the same auction.
Is that proper sign language? And maybe this is somebody posing as a sign language interpreter that was just taking a shortcut.
I'm doing the
because that's what I would do. That's what I would do to signal money is being spent.
Right. It's smart. Joining us on the line right now, ESPN.com senior writer and fantasy expert Eric Karabell. Going to talk some of what we saw last night. First of all, did you watch any of the 24-hour-long marathon or whatever it has been, Eric, and did you enjoy it?
I not only watched, I was a part of it.
Oh, please tell me what you did.
I'm in
I did
Bristol,
not see you.
Connecticut, and yes, so myself and Mike Clay and Daniel Dopp, we sat at a desk for about 4 hours, and we mock draft with the people out there.
Nice.
And then the camera would pan to us every once in a while, and somebody would say, "Why'd you do that?" Or "Who you taking next?" And I would point to it on my iPad, and I would say, "That's why I did that." So yes, we were doing that, and we're doing that again today. Going to be another busy day here in Bristol, bucolic Bristol, and I'm just glad to be a part of it.
How many leagues are you in?
Not that many. I get that question a lot. It's like assumed that I'm playing in a ton of leagues, but I've been doing this a really long time, and I found that I don't enjoy being in a ton of leagues. I enjoy being only in a few leagues that I really care about. So I will end up drafting a lot of teams, probably more than 20, but a lot of them will be for like purposes of like television and mock drafting and all that, and maybe 5 I'll care about.
Do you take cash under the table to draft for fill-in radio hosts during the summer?
I do not. And if I did, I certainly wouldn't admit it on the radio.
1-888-SAY-ESPN, 888-729-3776. Hit us up if you have questions for Eric Karabell about fantasy football and drafts and so forth. But I'm going to ask you off the top, who do you think is going to likely be the biggest bust that will go in the top 10 in most fantasy drafts?
Well, if it's a quarterback or Rob Gronkowski, I mean, that's a standard answer I give every year. I mean, Gronkowski has never actually finished in the top 10 in a value-based system where you compare him to other tight ends. He's a good player, but he misses too many games. So I wouldn't take him in any of the first 2 rounds, maybe not, probably right after that. And then anybody who takes a quarterback in the first round, even if Aaron Rodgers puts up huge numbers, it's not as valuable as people realize because of the difference between him and other quarterbacks. And the scarcity, relatively speaking, of running backs putting up numbers. So I think those are the top guys right off the top that I would say that they will be on my do not draft list. If you want names, I mean, Ezekiel Elliott can't be a top 10 pick, not missing 6 games or 7 weeks. He just can't be. I think anybody who takes him in the first 2 rounds is making a huge mistake. I think Lamar Miller, there's some risk there. Marshawn Lynch, there's risk there. I mean, this is a guy who missed a year and probably won't even catch passes. So those are some early picks that I would shy away from.
1-888-SAY-ESPN, 888-729-3776 if you have questions about your squad for Eric Karabell, fantasy expert and ESPN.com senior writer. All right, so I'm in a weird spot because I'm a Skins fan, and I don't like picking players on teams I like because there's that awkward conundrum of being mad about 2 things instead of 1. However, some people think that Kirk Cousins and Terrell Pryor, Kirk, as I like to call him, are going to blow up. What should I do?
They are going to blow up. Kirk Cousins has been a top 8 fantasy quarterback each of the past 2 seasons, and nobody ever drafts him in the top 10 at the position. I don't know what's going to change this year. I mean, people say, yeah, the Redskins lost their top 2 receivers. They weren't that great. I mean, they got a guy in Pryor who's younger, more athletic. Unlike Deshaun Jackson, won't miss games. Unlike him, he's bigger than 5'7". I mean, I think they're going to have another great season offensively. Now, your defense is a problem. But, I tend to avoid players on my favorite team in fantasy drafts, but I also tend to separate these 2 things. I'll have enough teams where I don't have to worry about that. I'll just check it like midnight on Sunday and see how my teams did. I'm not one of those guys who follows during the day all day and lives and dies with every touchdown. So, if you're a Redskins fan and you don't want to take Kirk Cousins, that's fine. If you don't want to take anybody on Dallas or Philly or the Giants, that's fine too. But I don't know. I think you got to separate the 2 things.
All right, you ready to take some phone calls?
Absolutely.
888-ESPN, 888-729-3776. I think it's Larry on line 1.
Hey, I'm the opposite of you guys, and I'm a diehard Steelers fan. Who should I take first overall, Le'Veon Bell or Antonio Brown?
David Johnson. So David Johnson's the best player in fantasy football, I think, easily. And the difference between him and Le'Veon Bell is the next suspension for Bell is a really big one, and Bell's had more injury problems. I know Johnson had the knee late last year, but I think that the bigger risk here for injury is Bell. Brown's fine, terrific player, but to me, David Johnson is the first pick in any draft, pretty much regardless of format. If you want to go Bell over Brown or Brown over Bell, I can't argue either way there. I just would say your quarterback, though, is not a top 10 quarterback. Roethlisberger, good player, but he misses games too, and that matters in fantasy. I would take David Johnson first.
1-888-ESPN, 888-729-3776. Cam, you're on the Dan Le Batard Show.
Hey, what's going on, fellas? Good morning.
Hey.
What up?
So I have a two-part question. So I'm definitely not gonna draft Zeke as my first-round pick, of course. But however, if I do end up drafting Zeke, who would you handcuff as a Cowboys running back? Would you draft McFadden or would you draft Alfred Morris to kind of set him up for the first couple of weeks until Zeke comes back? Thanks.
I think it's clearly McFadden, and it's not just it's 7 weeks of your fantasy season, which is half of a fantasy regular season. So people that take Ezekiel Elliott in the first 3 rounds, I think, are kind of wasting a pick. When he comes back, he should be great. I think McFadden is the guy clearly over Alfred Morris. That's what it looks like coming out of Dallas camp. And really, McFadden should be good. He should be a borderline top 10 running back in the first 6 games of their season. So if you take him in round 6 or 7, I think that's okay. And by the way, you can take McFadden even if you don't draft Ezekiel Elliott. I mean, you kind of mess somebody else's roster up. That's the smart thing to do.
1-888-ESPN, 888-729-3776. We're talking with Eric Karabell, ESPN.com senior writer and fantasy expert and draft killer proponent, which I'm a big fan of. Eric, you're on the line with Eric.
Hi, guys. Thanks for taking my call. I was just wondering if there's anybody out there that people are sleeping on that are drafted in later rounds that you seem to be pretty high on.
Oh, yeah. I mean, how much time you got? I could probably list 5 guys easily at running back and receiver that are going a little bit too late that I like. I mean, Jacquizz Rodgers of Tampa is clearly their starter in the first month because Doug Martin's suspended. Kareem Hunt of the Chiefs is not being looked upon like the other rookie running backs, but I think he's better than Spencer Ware right now. I think he'll take that job really soon. Terrence West is Baltimore's starter going in like round 10, which is kind of ridiculous there. At receiver, Tyrell Williams is clearly starting for the Chargers, and Mike Williams is clearly not. Kelvin Benjamin's going a little bit late. Tyreek Hill's going a little bit late. Kenny Britton Cleveland, Pryor had 1,000 yards last year. Why can't Kenny Britton Cleveland? He can. So why is he going in round 8? I don't get it. Those are just a few names off the top of my head.
1-888-ESPN, 1-888-729-3776. Steve, you're on the air.
Hey, this is Steve. I was just wondering about, Melvin Gordon or Devontae Freeman, and then also, what do you think about Martellus Bennett going to Green Bay? The last time they had a great tight end was Jermichael Finley, and he lit it up. Wop, wop. Thank you.
Wop, wop, whatever that means. I would say this about Martellus Bennett. He's had some good times in his career, and he's kind of disappeared at times. I don't think Aaron Rodgers is going to look to him as much as people think. He's got so many other weapons on the outside. They have a running game now in Ty Montgomery. So I think Bennett might get a little bit overrated. Is he a top 10 tight end? Probably. Is he getting more than 60, 65 receptions? Is he scoring more than 7, 8 times? I don't think so. So I'd be careful there. And I flip a coin on Freeman versus Gordon. I mean, Gordon scored 12 touchdowns last year. That probably goes down. But Freeman also didn't have to deal with Tevin Coleman for a month last year. So his numbers probably go down a little. I've got them ranked consecutively. I think at 5 and 6 among running backs. So flip a coin.
Last one of the segment. Jason, what's up?
Thanks, fellas. When would you take a quarterback? Obviously, it really depends, but what round would you take a quarterback? Thank you.
I would start maybe with round 8. I mean, there's just so many quarterbacks out there, so I'm going to avoid the Brady, Rodgers, Breeze guys at the top. I'm definitely avoiding Andrew Luck in round 6 where he's going. That's a serious issue. He could miss a month. So I'll wait. I'll take Derek Carr, Jameis Winston, Stafford, Prescott, Cousins. They're all out there in round 8 or 9. That's the easiest thing to do in fantasy is load up on running backs and receivers in the first 8, 9 rounds, then take a quarterback or 2 and go week to week depending on matchups.
We're talking with Eric Karabell here on the Dan Le Batard Show. He's an ESPN.com senior writer and a fantasy expert. You going to hang around for one more segment?
Absolutely.
All right. Lucky y'all, because I would otherwise just open up my mentions and start screaming at you about how you're stupid. But anyway, Eric is smarter than I am when it comes to football, and so we're going to talk more about that. On the line right now is Eric Karabell, ESPN.com senior writer and fantasy expert, taking your phone calls about what are undoubtedly going to be your garbage fantasy football teams. 1-888-ESPN, 1-888-729-3776. Sammy, what's up? Sammy, you're on the air.
Oh, yeah, thank you, guys. I just wanted to ask, in my league, whomever scores the lowest points is the one that wins. Should I go with Osweiler? Is he going to be a starter anyways, or should I just pick Bortles?
Well, I would try to avoid Brock Osweiler if you're trying to score the most points in your league. And in a general sense, that's how you win a league, is to score the most points. I mean, Blake Bortles is a guy we could talk about. He was a top 10 fantasy quarterback last season. We expect the Jaguars to run a lot more this year, play better defense, so they don't have to have Bortles throw the ball 40 times a game. But we rank him like the number 18 or 19 quarterback. So you can do a lot better than both of those fellows.
1-888-ESPN, 1-888-729-3776. Will, what's your question for Eric Karabell?
Hey, I had my draft last night, 10-team league. I took Tyrod Taylor in the 15th round. I would call that a steal.
Yeah.
How about you?
I agree. It's a guy who nobody looks at as a top 10 quarterback, but because he runs the ball for 500 yards every year, he's generally around the top 10 quarterbacks. And, even though they traded Sammy Watkins, they have weapons there. I mean, that rookie Zay Jones is going to be terrific. They have a running game. So Tyrod Taylor, I don't think he's a definite top 10 guy, but if you get him in the 15th round and the rest of your team is great, perfect.
1-888-ESPN, 1-888-729-3776. Ben, you got Eric Karabell.
Hey, I've got a question for you. I have Brandon Cooks as one of my top wide receivers. I was wondering how you feel about that. My other receivers are Devontae Adams, Martavis Bryant, and Adam Thielen. I was wondering how my receiver corps was looking for you.
Yeah, I like it. I mean, I think those are guys that you can count on for this year. I mean, Devontae Adams isn't the number one guy in Green Bay, but he performed as a top 20 receiver last season. Nothing wrong with him. I mean, the concern I had with Bryant, other than the fact he could be suspended again for life whenever, is that he doesn't get a lot of catches. So in a point-per-reception format, you're looking at a guy there who might end up with 50 catches, but he scores touchdowns, he'll get some yards. He's a really good player, but there's like a little something wrong there, too.
You're listening to the Dan Le Batard Show on ESPN Radio. Clinton Yates filling in here. Eric Karabell joins us, ESPN.com senior writer and fantasy expert. Give us a phone call if you got questions. 1-888-ESPN, 1-888-729-3776. Julius.
Hey, guys, what's going on? I actually got two questions for you. For our first question, Adrian Peterson, still a first-round pick, and I have a choice between two tight ends, Jimmy Graham or Greg Olsen. Which way should I go?
I think Olsen's clearly the guy there. Every year he puts up huge numbers for Carolina. He's reliable. The touchdowns will be there. I mean, to me, he's safer. With Peterson, I mean, Mark Ingram's really good. He catches passes, gets into the end zone. I don't expect Peterson to be a top 20 running back. I think there's a risk of injury here because of age and also because of Mark Ingram putting up numbers. I think it's a timeshare at best. I could see Peterson ending up with like 800 rushing yards but getting the touchdowns close in while Ingram does like more dirty work. But neither one of them are going to be top 10 running backs because of the other.
Eric, I'll take one here from the 1-800-Flowers.com Twitter feed. By the way, do not make a habit of jumping in my Twitter feed, people with fantasy questions. Anyway, Fournette or McCaffrey, this guy asks.
I have him ranked consecutively. In a point-per-reception league, it's McCaffrey. He's going to catch at least 60 passes. In a standard format, it'd be Fournette because he'll get more touchdowns, and he's going to rush for like 1,200 yards.
All right, 1-888-ESPN, 1-888-729-3776. Sean, you're on with Eric Karabell.
Hey, what's up? First off, fly, Eagles, fly, baby.
Yeah.
My question is, just by formula of position, for the first four rounds, you mean the first four positions that you're drafting?
They're either running backs or receiver. I never go into a draft saying it has to be a running back in round one or it has to be a receiver in round one. I take the best available, and I usually do that for the first 7 or 8 rounds unless I have to take a quarterback earlier, which in a standard league I don't. So don't ever go into a draft saying, oh, my first pick, number 9, has to be a receiver. No, it has to be the best available, and then you construct your team around that. So that's what I do.
Thanks for the phone call. Eric, I got to ask you, what's your live draft situation when you're not doing it on television?
What do you mean? Like
you're a bar guy, you're a house guy. Like how do you go about when you're in your leagues doing live drafts, or do you not show up with your friends and do it?
Oh no, I mean if we're all getting together somewhere, I go, of course. I mean that's the best part of the season is seeing your buddies and doing stuff and talking, trash talking, throwing things at each other. Do I prefer being like just sitting at my desk and doing a draft so I can study, I can cross out names, I can look at a tiered system? Yeah, I mean I think I'll do best that way, concentrating and focused. But, I mean, there's nothing like being in a live draft in person or an auction, even better, with your buddies. That's the best part of the season.
Last year I did it. 2 years ago I did a live draft, and it was the first time I had jumped back in like a decade. But it was also, these people had all been playing for a while. It was also the first time any of them had ever been at a live draft where every single person in the league was there at once. And that surprised me.
And it's much better that way, really. You don't want to ever have anybody on the phone. As long as everybody's in person, I think that's so much better. That's so much fun. When everybody's on the phone or just in a draft room, it's like, all right, no big deal. But you can't really trash talk there.
Last time you won a league, one-word answer.
Last season.
Oh, excuse me. No, I'm just messing with you. Thank you, Eric. He's Eric Karabell. He's a fantasy expert. He's an ESPN.com senior writer, and I'm going to lean on him heavily when I have my draft coming up. Thanks, bro.
Thank you.
Please don't kick me out of my league, Freeman. I want to play in this league. I'm Clinton Yates. Fill it in for Dan Le Batard. Coming up, Michelle Beadle. You probably heard of her. It's ESPN Radio.
Don't forget, you can hear more of my sons Dan and Stu weekdays starting at 10 Eastern on ESPN Radio and ESPNU.
Hi, everyone. Stugotz here. Support for the Dan Le Batard Show podcast comes from our friends at Rocket Mortgage by Quicken Loans. Chances are you are confident when it comes to your work, your hobbies, and your life. Rocket Mortgage gives you the same level of confidence when it comes to buying a home or refinancing your existing home loan. Rocket Mortgage is simple, allowing you to fully understand all the details and be confident you are getting the right mortgage for you. To get started, go to rocketmortgage.com/Stugotz. That's rocketmortgage.com/Stugotz, Stugotz, equal housing lender, licensed in all 50 states, NMLS consumeraccess.org number 3030.
Dan Le Batard.
There are some legitimately meaty race stories out there.
Stugotz.
Great.
This is the Dan Le Batard Show with the Stugotz on ESPN Radio.
My name's Clinton Yates, filling in here on a Tuesday, letting you guys know what's really going on in America, not just in your little sports bubble. By the by, Michelle Beadle joins us, host of Sports Nation and NBA coverage. Michelle, do you play fantasy football?
Okay. Yes, no. I will tell you this. Matthew Berry has talked me into starting it probably the last 3, 4, 5 years in a row, and every time I say, no, I know myself, I'm going to lose any sort of interest. I do it anyways, and I lose interest by at least week 3, if not sooner.
Do you show up to live drafts?
I've shown up to one live draft, which was out here in L.A., and it was a combination of actors and athletes, and I don't know what I was thinking. Because the thing is, you get wrapped up, it's like infectious, and you think, man, everybody loves this so much, I must be missing out. Maybe I don't get it. All right, let me try again. I try again. And sure enough, I don't care. And then the worst part is I just sit on my team. And so people want to make trades and stuff. And I just say, I don't even want to make the trades because I'm, why should I help somebody else win if I don't even care?
Right.
So it's just sort of, I was not invited to any this year. So I feel like finally the message has been given.
That's what I'm afraid of, is that I started doing it the last 2 years. And now that I'm doing it, I'm scared that I'm going to get kicked out because I'm not quite a draft wrecker, but I'm sort of close to it. And I also sit on transactions. And so I'm afraid that my buddy's going to be like, dude, we don't need you this year because I don't win or anything like that. And but now I like it. That's the issue, is that I'm actually into it now. I'm into it more than I am actual football, which is problematic because I used to make fun of that person all the time. But that's the truth.
Now you're that person.
Yeah,
now you're that person. I don't know if it's an attention span thing, which, by the way, does not speak highly of myself. But I want to get into it. I'm a competitive person. There's somewhere halfway through where I'm like, what am I doing? Why am I doing this? We're not getting paid extra. We don't win anything. So no, I'm out.
Speaking of,
but I do have a 3-hour Sports Nation today as part of the fantasy football marathon.
Really?
So that works.
You guys are doing 3 hours?
Yeah, we're on from I want to say 1 to 4 Pacific. So is that 4 to 7? Yeah, we are going to. I don't even know. We've got all kinds of stuff. I think there's food. I was promised food, so that's why I was like, oh, this will be fun. We're going to have all kinds of stuff, and everyone else here kind of loves it. So I think we'll be all right.
All right. Speaking of, it's time for Fantasy on the Fours. 4 minutes in every hour. There it is.
Fantasy on the Fours.
4 minutes in every hour, we give you the fantasy information that you need. At the running back position, Eric Karabell, who we just had on the program, by the by, believes that Bilal Powell will be a sleeper pick to look out for. Eric wants you to completely avoid drafting LeGarrette Blount. Finally, Eric believes that a breakout star that you'll want to have on your roster will be running back Kareem Hunt. Fantasy on the Fours, 4 minutes into each hour today during the Fantasy Football Marathon on ESPN Radio. We're joined on the Dan Le Batard Show by Michelle Beadle obviously covers the NBA in addition to hosting Sports Nation. What were your first thoughts when the schedule came out yesterday?
I mean, I was excited for the schedule that came out, opening day. For me, Christmas is the big one. I know it's just when it really truly feels like, oh yeah, we are in the NBA season, because there's nowhere to go, and there's, I think, 4 games this season. I'm just excited. I don't go through it's not like the NFL schedule where everybody sort of has a party and goes through it and guesses what's going to happen. I'm just pumped the season's here. I'm excited that this is the first time that I can really remember that the NBA just didn't have an off season. I mean, we talk so much about how the NFL has been brilliant in figuring out how to monopolize 12 months out of the calendar year. And this summer has been, for me anyways, more NBA talk than I ever remember, whether it be drama or moves or overseas initiatives. There's so much going on. And so it doesn't truly feel like basketball has left my life, which I've loved.
Do you think that that's going to affect how people feel about the beginning of the season? Like, do you think that's going to add to it? Or do you think by the time the actual basketball starts, people are going to say, oh, well, this is just hoops? Because I know a lot of folks have been like, the offseason is better than the regular season because of how they look at how the games happen. Yeah, and I think we've had so much drama. I mean, just at the minimum, we've got the Carmelo Anthony stuff, which has been just this ongoing saga of does he leave, doesn't he leave, he's still there, who knows. But more importantly, it's the Kyrie Irving, LeBron James. If nothing happens and they don't move Irving, then they start that team together at the beginning of the year, having now seen sort of, I mean, if we're just going to call it dislike, or the way these two guys just don't like each other, they don't get along, whatever happened, it's going to be awkward, and that makes for great television. I mean, it's why reality television is so big. It's just perfectly organic drama, and I think that is going to make, whether you're a Cavs fan or not, I think that's of interest. At least to me it is, because it's such a bizarrely almost high school sort of play that these two have gone through. Right. It's so public and weird, and we're just here to consume it all, and we'll be waiting. I don't know that they move him, so I think we may actually start out with Kyrie Irving in a Cavs uniform. Hold up, you said reality? Did you watch Bachelor in Paradise last night? Okay, see, I'm starting to think I'm really bad for TV. I don't watch Bachelor either. Oh! But here's the thing is, I watch more television than anyone I know. I just don't watch, I don't do dancing with this. I don't do, which is, by the way, bad network selling teammate. I'm like, I don't watch any of those. I've never seen one in my life. I make fun of it from afar. I don't, I watch the television show based on it, but that's about it. I know. Why do you love it so much? Well, I think it's just because, first of all, I have a reasonable soft spot in my heart for dating shows, and I had sort of forgotten about this until somebody randomly from college tweeted me, and it was like, I knew that you were going to be somebody tweeting about The Bachelor to the world, because when we were in college, there used to be this run of shows on WGN where it was Change of Heart, Eliminate, The Fifth Wheel, and we used to all watch these shows, and I realized maybe I just liked this format, and I had sort of forgotten about it until I got back into Bachelor and Bachelorette. And Bachelor in Paradise is actually the best version of the show, because there's not all the fancy nonsense. They're just out at a resort trying to have fun. Anyway. Trying to have fun. It's Michelle Beadle. She's joining us here on the Dan Le Batard Show. I'm Clinton Yates, filling in. She hosts Sports Nation. So, look, you're in L.A., and Lord knows we've talked about LeVar Ball enough, but Lonzo actually is in the NBA. And at this stage, now with the schedule out and so forth, where are we in terms of what Laker fans, in your opinion, think about who he's going to be as an actual NBA basketball player? I think there's a genuine, and granted, it's hard to get more depressed. I mean, they've had a tough little run here as Lakers fans go. But I think there's a genuine excitement for what he means. I think there's a genuine excitement for not necessarily all in on this season, but I think the idea of the following season bringing potentially a big name or a couple big names out west. I think there's sort of it may not all change overnight, but there's definitely some light down at the end of the tunnel. And I'm excited for the league, for the season to start, for the simple reason that, we can talk about Lonzo Ball. I mean, it's just, I went to Big 3 on Sunday. It was awesome. I had such fun because, all of our ESPN buddies were playing. But I was also disappointed because it's, there are genuine celebrities in the crowd, and LeVar Ball was being touted as the top of that list. And I just was like, what alternate universe have I found myself in? And so, I mean, luckily I didn't stay. I love Ice Cube, but I didn't stay for that at the end where they had the 4-point shooting contest.
But it's just, I just want to get to a point now where Lonzo is front and center, and we're only talking about him. And I'm not naive enough to think we'll never speak of LeVar again, but at least we'll have 82 games worth of Lonzo Ball to discuss.
What do you think about what Commissioner Adam Silver said about marijuana in the NBA and potentially open to having it coming off of the banned substance list?
Once again, the NBA front and center getting it. If this thing ever finally gets legalized across the board in the United States, it will be very interesting to see how it pushes the hands of all the different leagues, because it's no longer a legal thing. You can't hide behind legality. You now have to sort of embrace it, learn about it. And by the way, I'm not a pot smoker, contrary to what Twitter might believe. I'm really not, but I do believe in the medical value in it, and I do think there's enough footage, there's enough data at this point to really sort of show that there are instances where this is so much better for people to deal with pain, to deal with all kinds of ailments, and not have to just pop pills. I mean, we've just been talking about Tiger Woods and 5 drugs, one of which, of course, was. But it's more dangerous when you're sort of trying to self-medicate. You don't know what you're doing. You're taking 75 different pharmaceutical pills. I love it. I love the idea that he may and will probably be the first one to embrace the idea of it. I want everyone to sort of read up and learn. I think there's just this sort of bad connotation with marijuana and the idea that anybody who takes part in it is just out to get stoned. And that's just not the truth. And living out here in California where it's legal for both medical and, at this point it will be recreational, you sort of have more of an insight into that, because you realize it's not what we thought of in college, where it's the dude on the couch who never leaves and just eats all day. It's legitimate people with real jobs who use it to take care of back issues and eye issues and sleep issues, and they are completely and totally productive members of society. So I'll be interested. I mean, I think this is going to be something in the next 20 years, which, by the way, 20 years is probably not even going to be done. But the NFL has been so anti that it'll be interesting to see how they deal.
All right, last thing I'll ask you. What are you going to do for 3 hours on the air today?
I like to do this thing, Clinton, where I do television, but in my mind, I'm thinking about other things.
Fair enough.
Just kidding. No, it'll be fun. I think Tom Arnold's coming. It'll be mayhem. Amin's on the whole 3 hours, and anytime Amin and I are together, there's potential for somebody getting fired, so I'm all in.
All right. Well, she's Michelle Beadle. She hosts Sports Nation and also is a monster part of the NBA coverage here on ESPN. What did you say, 4 to 7 Eastern today?
Yes. That sounds right.
All right. It's part of our fantasy football marathon. And remember, tell Marcellus for me, Doobie Brothers ain't got no bangers. All right?
I will.
0 bangers. All right. Appreciate it. Thank you, Michelle.
Bye.
Oh, for those of you who don't know what that means, I went on Sports Nation a couple of weeks ago, and they were talking about the Doobie Brothers, to which I said, I have no idea who they are, and they ain't got no bangers anyway. Marcellus Wiley almost fell out of his chair. That's all. Coming up, we're going to talk more about the NBA. Headline, Vicodin, Dilaudid, Xanax, Ambien, and THC found in Tiger Woods' system at the time of DUI arrest. When this story first unfolded, it was a very awkward sort of situation because there was video and it wasn't exactly clear, sort of what happened. And I'm not entirely sure it still is. But I got to say, when I first read this and I was trying to stumble through that read on the SportsCenter update, because I don't know these drugs. I'm not familiar or in regular parlance of what most prescription medications or what have you are. And so when I sort of stumbled over one, somebody tweeted at me, at Clinton Yates, I would listen to a whole show of me botching medical names. Okay, that's fine. I'm the kind of guy that's come from a background where I'm borderline scared of any pills of any sort. If I have a headache, I'm going to go to sleep and drink water. I don't like taking Advil. Last night was Madville, to quote Kanye West. But what I wonder is, now that we know what he was doing, because we were told at the time it wasn't alcohol, and everybody was like, oh, okay, well, whatever. He was still asleep at the wheel in the middle of the street, going back home from a restaurant. I do wonder, though, where our stigmas will lie with Tiger Woods now that we know that it was basically just pills, but it was also a bunch of stuff in his system at the same time. We just had Michelle Beadle on, who talked about the NBA considering legalizing, or rather taking marijuana or THC, whatever, taking marijuana and cannabis off of their banned substance list for the purposes of pain regulation. But I know, and maybe this is my bias or stigma on the other side, I know that when I hear somebody's got 5 drugs in their system, it sounds like a problem. And that's not a judgment. I've heard Dan talk on this show very much about how addiction is very real, and that's something that I did not need him to tell me to know. And so I don't know, though, because of my ignorance to the prescription drug culture, whether or not this is awful, whether or not this is standard, or whether or not this is just sort of an aberration for somebody who really does have a problem. Mike, do you have any idea on that front?
Yeah, absolutely I do. I lean on personal experience. I think there was too much explaining away. A lot of people were satisfied just to hear that it wasn't alcohol at the time. And I feel that alcohol is more stigmatized in our society than prescription drugs, when someone can easily abuse and know exactly what they're doing when it comes to prescription drugs. Now, there is obviously a situation in which you can mistakenly take too many, but typically that happens initially. We were a few weeks removed from his surgery, and this is a guy that's dealt with injuries throughout his career. So it leaves one room to speculate that he knew exactly what he was doing and taking what he did.
So this is a lot, is what you're saying.
Certainly sounds like a lot. I mean, you have the evidence of him asleep at the wheel.
Right. Yeah. And the reason I ask is because, to me, yeah, there is a large difference between I take a lot of drugs because I'm in a lot of pain, and I take a lot of drugs because I don't know how else to manage anything.
And keep in mind, Clinton, I don't know enough about these drugs in particular, but oftentimes there are warnings and not to mix certain prescriptions. That's often the case. You got to imagine when it comes to 5 different ones, you might have something there. Again, speculating because I don't know enough about these. But anytime that you get into mixing prescription drugs, especially the ones that you can't really pronounce, it's a dangerous thing.
Yeah, and I've talked about this on the air before, and the reason why I'm talking about this now is because I think forward to what we're going to know of Tiger in the coming years. Because for a lot of people, Tiger Woods is far more than just a golfer in their minds. Tiger Woods is the guy who was a pioneer in sport. Clearly that was specifically golf, but just in general, in terms of people you're going to think of when you think of athletes in your life. And who were the greatest ones? There's Tiger. He obviously had a tremendous career trajectory. I'm not ever going to say that I saw a better golfer because I would be lying if I did. But I also know that when Tiger stopped golfing, I stopped watching golf. And I watched golf before Tiger golfed, or at least before he became famous. And so my personal investment in him as a human and as a fan is real. And I believed when he first had that incident in Thanksgiving with his wife and everything fell apart. At the time, I said he's never winning another major. It just didn't seem like he was ever going to be able to put it all back together. And now I think we're so far beyond the golf discussion that I've got to wonder about Tiger Woods' general well-being on a regular basis. It's a little unfair to speculate that he's got some sort of a problem. I don't know that. But as a human being, as somebody that would like to see Tiger be able to find a life after golf that is fulfilling, it's scary to find this out in such detail. He might have been a scumbag when it came to dealing with his wife, but that doesn't necessarily mean I want to see the guy go down in some awful blaze of glory or lack thereof. I am concerned as a fan. And that leads to what my question is. It's about what is going to be the next phase of Tiger Woods' life. Is it possible for him to move on from golf? And that's what the scariest part about these individual sports are when you have these prodigies, is that if one little thing or one large thing gets tweaked, and all of a sudden the house of cards comes falling down, there's nothing else there. I really, really hope Tiger can find something that is fulfilling in his life that is unrelated to golf, and he can do it without being in pain. I just have no idea what that is, because he's never shown us much more than that. I'm Clinton Yates, filling in for Dan Le Batard. It's ESPN Radio. Now, yesterday, I told you all about my feelings about NFL football. I'm sort of a football-adjacent fan at this stage of my life. I grew up in D.C., where I rooted for the NFL franchise here in Washington. They won a couple things. I used to go to a lot of games back at RFK. Season tickets, yada, yada. They moved out to FedEx. Got terrible, sort of lost interest, but still followed the team. I picked Sean Taylor, my favorite player on that team of all time. He tragically lost his life, and then I sort of checked out. Came back to it recently for job and personal purposes, but now I watch football basically to hang out with my friends. And so I know what I'm talking about when I'm on here, this here box, which, that's not always guaranteed either. But I said what I was going to do is I was going to go over my top 5 favorite moments of the football season last year as they felt for me. But because it's Tuesday, we're only going to do 4, and there's no need to screw up the chronology. But let me tell you about the one last year that I enjoyed a lot as well. It happened in October. I believe it was on Sunday Night Football. And it was the Cardinals-Seahawks tie after overtime. Maybe the worst football game I've ever seen in my life. That wasn't actually a bad football game.
Woof.
What's that, Mike?
Woof.
I don't even know what that means.
That means woof. I remember that game.
Right?
I don't remember the end because I didn't stay awake for it.
There was like a blocked punt in the fourth quarter. I want to say it got sent to overtime on something that should have been overtime. There were 2 missed field goals, I believe. It was a ridiculous game that ended in a tie with no touchdowns. Or was there one touchdown that I can't remember all the details.
Do you think Sunday Night Football is aided by the other games going on Sunday? Because I don't. I actually get up for Monday Night Football because at that point my addiction starts kicking back in and I need to see football again. Even Thursday Night Football, the non-contractually obliged division matchups in which you have to put the Titans versus Jaguars. I'll watch it because I want to watch football again, but I feel like you get to juxtapose it so quickly to whatever the red zone is, which is just straight up crack. And then you have one game that if you end up with a Seahawks-Cardinals tie, it just makes you really down on all things football until, obviously, of course, Monday night where you're back at it.
I think so. I think the Thursday night football situation hurts that. I mean, it aids your point, but hurts that overall feeling about the NFL as well. Because when you come into the week with 2 goofball teams matched up from a uni standpoint and you get a bad game, and it's not even the weekend yet, that's not good. The Thursday night football aids the Sunday 1 o'clocks. The Sunday night football hurts Monday night football. Like if Sunday night football is a bad game, I am less likely to watch Monday night football. Does that make sense?
I guess it's sort of opposite of what I feel.
Really?
Yeah, because by Monday afternoon I start missing football again. I just the red zone, I essentially OD on football. I'm upset that there's only 3-4 o'clock games because I'm starting to come down from the drug. And unless I got a bunch of fantasy dudes playing in that Sunday nighter, it needs to be a good one. Otherwise, I'm going to bed early. And that Cardinals-Seahawks atrocity was certainly an early bedtime.
I love that.
So
game,
I think I know what you're doing with this list already. This is the first day that we've done it because we forgot to do it on Monday. That's why it's a top 4, oddly enough.
Yes.
But if this is sort of the template, I'm going to be really aggravated by the time Friday rolls around.
Which means I have done well. That's all I'm going to say. I'm Clinton Yates, filling in for Dan Le Batard here on ESPN Radio. All right, so in addition to what my idiotic thoughts about last season are, there was some news yesterday from Commissioner Roger Goodell because, again, whether you like it or not, NFL fans, the national anthem is now going to be a pivot point for every single storyline in the NFL every week in every stadium. Let's hear what he has to say.
The national anthem is a special moment to me. It's a point of pride, and that is a really important moment. And I think, but we also have to understand the other side that people do have rights, and we want to respect those. I was with the Jets a few weeks ago, and one of the players was there, and they said, there's a time and a place. That's what we all have to sort of understand, the responsibility of doing it the right time and in the right way. And what we see is a lot of our players going in the community and really taking the platform they have and being active and creating dialogue and actually making really positive change. And that's what I think is so important. Protest to progress is what I call it. And we all have to recognize that people want to see change. Let's go out and try to make that change happen in a peaceful and an important way. And we've seen our players lead that. We saw it in Denver with Brandon Marshall. We saw it with Doug Baldwin in Seattle. They went out and did some really great things in the community to affect change in a positive way. And that's what we want to see our players do. And I think it's a positive thing.
Who is this man and what has he done with Roger Goodell? I'm sorry, we all have rights? I was a bit surprised to hear this in such a sort of docile and, well, generous tone, if it may be. Slightly sort of contradictory, but we'll address that in short. This is sort of 2 for 2 in the last couple major moves that Goodell has made for me. Between the way they handled the Ezekiel Elliott situation, don't get at me on that. I don't care about consistency when it comes to matters like that. And then this is decent convo. Now, look, I don't subscribe to the notion of protest in the field or somehow inappropriate versus progress in the so-called community, because the whole point is that we're all in the same community. But for Goodell to come out and say straight up people have rights, that's a little surprising to me as a football fan.
He's really rallying from the football players live longer comment.
Which was a serious low point, if you ask me.
2 out of 3 ain't bad, though.
Not
Ezekiel
bad.
Elliott, we all have rights.
Gets you in the Hall of Fame in baseball.
I know it's a low bar.
And I don't mean to
Maybe
laugh.
you said football players live longer at the beginning to really set our expectations low for this upcoming season.
One of those
now he's
deals?
just dropping haymakers.
It's like when you really can cook and you go on a date the first time, you're like, yo, we'll go to carry out. And then the next time you come back with an actual meal. And it's like, well, why didn't you just do that the first time? Under promise, over deliver. Works in a lot of businesses, including this one in radio. I was impressed with Goodell in the last week. I don't need consistency when it comes to some of these penalties, particularly when we're talking about potential victims of domestic violence. That's not the place for me to be worried about what happened to the previous guy who was penalized. Yes, it is inconsistent. Yes, that was probably too little. But the thoroughness with which they handled that investigation and that situation and the abundance of information they put out regarding it and the transparency with which they did it was tremendous, in my opinion. Don't get it twisted. I'm not out here caping for the shield. Never have, never will. But in terms of how Goodell has represented himself in this position, his last week has been a good one. So for him to come out and say, yeah, there's work to be done in the community. He even had a little tagline, Mike. Protest the process. Wear the T-shirts.
T-shirt time.
He's clearly got a guy on it. Or a person, rather. That person's probably a woman, because that person is probably smarter. But what I'm saying is that he has turned around in a week what could have been 2 awful PR situations into something that have actually been reasonably progressive with some amount of decorum. Which is not exactly what I expect out of him in the NFL. But you know what? Every once in a while, as they say, a blind squirrel finds a nut.
Catch more of the Dan Le Batard Show with the Stugotz, 10 to 1 Eastern on ESPN Radio and ESPNU.
You're listening to Love Advice with Leanne. Caller, you're on the air.
Hi, Leanne. Longtime listener, first-time caller. Why, in your professional opinion, do you never take my calls off the air?
Is this Carl?
Yep, it's Carl. I mean, we had a few dates. Everything was great. I thought,
Well, when you switch to Geico, you could save a lot of money on car insurance.
Okay, awesome.
You should call them.
I will.
Geico, because saving 15% or more on car insurance is always a great answer.
Don Le Batard.
Get out of the playground! This is a cathedral! Stop knocking over the holy water!
Stugotz.
Take it seriously! Le Batard, there was a call last night! Dissect it with importance!
This is the Don Le Batard Show with the Stugotz on ESPN Radio.
I'm Clinton Yates, filling in here on a Tuesday. Show has come to a grinding halt, but that's okay, because that's sort of what we do here. I'm excited about a lot of things. Bachelor in Paradise started last night. Talked to a couple people I know who have been on the show. The NBA schedule came out yesterday. My Zardos, those would be the Washington Wizards, for those of you who have never heard me on ESPN Radio before. Zardos got all sorts of games. Like 18, I believe, was the number I saw. I want to say they had less than 5 last year. Which means John Wall is officially in the building from a national standpoint. I'm very excited about that. But there's also some matchups that are intriguing to other people for different reasons. Everybody's big in the NBA about this, yo, my man's just going back to his former team setup. The NBA's big on juicing that. It's a good move, you know. That's something to get excited about. That's about as exciting as a random sort of off the field or off the court headliners you're going to get. October 26th, DeMarcus Cousins goes back to Sacramento with the Pelicans. So that should be a fun one. The Rockets go to the Knicks on November 1st. That'll be a very fun one, particularly if Melo's getting traded. But because we're lucky and because this guy is a stand-up guy, my man Whaboom joins us here on the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. Lucas, what's up, dude?
Hey.
Lucas, can you hear me?
Yes, I'm here.
What's up, man? How are you today?
I'm good, brother. I'm good. I'm just doing some construction work on a new property that I just purchased out here in West Hollywood area.
So I guess you're doing pretty well. We're talking with Lucas Yancey of the Bachelorette fame. All right, so I tweeted last night that your presence was missed on Paradise. Are you allowed to talk about whether or not you appeared on the show or not?
You know, I would definitely have to say that it was missed, probably mostly by me, I think. Yeah, I mean, I can tell you that Paradise is pretty amazing, but you never know when Whaboom can just be swimming out of the waters and climbing from trees and then just, you know, jumping in the pool, doing backflips. So we'll have to wait and see, I guess.
All right, so tell me the beginning of this. For people who don't know, you made it onto The Bachelorette, Rachel Lindsay's season. You were wearing your T-shirts. You were dropping your tagline. It upset a lot of people. I happen to think it was quite funny because, look, it's television, it's entertainment overall, but some people thought it was offensive to the show or whatever. Where did this start, and when did you decide this is how you were going to go through with it?
Sorry, I'm confused on which tagline. Which one was that?
Very funny.
Was that the that one?
Yeah, that one. That
one. Okay, good. So it definitely wakes you up in the morning, depending on what time you wake up in the morning. And so I was on The Bachelorette with Rachel Lindsay, a wonderful girl, and a lot of other guys on the show, of course, because that's probably how TV works. And so the Whaboom thing has been a part of who I am, and it's really just an expression of kind of, you know, love, passion, and to inspire people, you know, to kind of just be who they are. And I would relate it to let's go out on a limb here. You know, Thomas Edison invented the light bulb, right? So
I see, yeah, very comparable.
Lucas Yancey, and created the little Whaboom. It kind of hit me like a lightning bolt, and you can't really explain where it comes from. It just, you know, ideas and creative thoughts just come to you, and then you just go with them. And what's funny is that I've been doing it and saying it since college, or before that, Whaboom, and since the womb, and I just never really got any grief from it, because in a natural setting, at a party or with some friends or whatnot, in a certain setting, it works. If you see it on TV when I'm just screaming it and doing it, every other edit, you don't really get to see more of who I am. The person behind the Whaboom. And it's, I think the people, every single person that I've ever met who said they didn't like me for whatever reason, seems to obviously think that I'm a really good guy and a very honest guy and a genuine person. And just to kind of give you some feedback, is I think that I was, one of the few people, or one of the, people there, not to speak on anyone else, but who was there for actually the right reasons, which is to be who you are, show who you are, and have some fun during this experience. And don't pretend like 8 million people aren't watching the show. And also try to connect with the person that's there. In this case, it was Rachel. So I wrote her poetry. That I think they showed one of the poems that I wrote her. We had some great times together on our dates. We connected, very well, and it would have been fun to get to know her more. But I think the way things played out, it was a
little tricky. It was a little tricky because you got involved with it with your boy Blake, which turned things to another story. But I don't want to relive that. I want to ask you, Lucas Yancey, how has your life changed since The Bachelorette, and how well is your Whaboom line doing? Full disclosure, I bought a tank top and I wear it with some level of frequency.
I saw you wearing the tank top, and I want to give a Whaboom shout out to that, brother.
Thank you.
Thanks for, it looks good on you.
Well, most things do.
Stylish. It's pretty comfortable, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It is Whaboomingly comfortable. How has your life changed since you left the show, though?
My life has changed. The thing is I've worked in the entertainment business for quite a while. I mean, I'm not afraid to say that I'm an actor. I do comedy, stand-up, comedic acting. So, a lot of production work. So, the thing is I'm kind of used to this type of environment to an extent. So, as I would call it, I don't feel like new celeb status. A lot of these people, I think, feel like, wow, I got 50,000 followers, and now I'm not going to talk to people and ignore people. With me, the more followers I get, the more humble I get. So it doesn't really change who I am as a person. It never will change who I am as a person. And what I would say to you that, in terms of getting more attention and going around to bars and going around to clubs, do I get people asking me to say Whaboom every 5 seconds? Yes, I do, which can get kind of, overwhelming. Not competitive, repetitive, yes. It can get a little repetitive, but I love to entertain. They say be careful what you wish for, and I think I kind of actually know what that means now.
Right. Fair enough.
But
he's Lucas Yancey. Yeah. You're going to probably see him coming up on Bachelor in Paradise. You know him as Whaboom. Thank you, Lucas.
All right, brother. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
That went well. I'm Clinton Yates. It's the Dan Le Batard Show on ESPN Radio. Letter grade on that Whaboom interview, Mike Ryan.
C-?
Whaboom for him or for me or for us?
Well, I'm trying to grade it. Look, if I'm trying to grade it as someone that has no idea who Whaboom is, that's probably a solid D+.
Right.
I feel like our setup was good enough.
Interviews on this program.
Yeah, on the whole, for interviews on this program, I'm going to stick with D+. I will say that the setup was good enough to give the people sort of enough a heads up that this dude was a space cadet.
Right. But I also think I'm getting...
He delivered on being a space cadet.
I think I'm getting a bit of a host curve here, because I've listened to a lot of interviews on this show that were equally Space Cadet-y when I had no idea what was going on. Norm Macdonald comes to mind.
Right.
I'm just saying.
Those are polarizing interviews. We did tend to sink into it, though. And I feel like we totally got Whaboom there. He was making the rules. So when dealing with a Space Cadet, I kind of feel that Dan and Stugotz would still be in control of things.
You wanted me to be more controlling. I was hoping he was. I was waiting for just one funny bit that we could use later, but that never happened. So then I had to jump in. I probably let that go 2 plays too loose, if you will. I kept it in for 2 extra plays.
Don't be too hard on yourself, because Dan and Stugotz have never encountered a creature quite like the Whaboom.
Oh,
so
no, I'm not worried about it.
Maybe they would have been playing by his rules too.
Fair enough. All right. Well, I want to get back to the NBA because I'm very excited about that. The schedule came out, and I got to say, listen, I'm a DC guy. I'm a Wizards fan. The Zardos being on national television this often is a new experience for me in this era of the team. In the Gilbert Arenas days, they were on TV all the time. Your man Hibachi was out here, dropping 50 points, banging game-winning shots. He was an exciting player in the league. But ever since we moved into the new phase with John Wall, Bradley Beal and the like, there's been this constant sort of tone of disrespect around the league. You know, the Wizards are just sort of always up and coming. And nobody's ever really afraid of the Zards. Well, it looks like that might have changed a little bit. And I'm not quite sure that Zardo's Twitter, if you will, is ready for the national attention. Because a lot of times, this is how I base my feelings about a lot of teams, is how their fans react, like on the internet and in public. And for as long as I've been a fan of this team, which is my entire life, there's a new set of people that have come to represent the Zards in the blogosphere, which is fine. It's a lot of new, by new, I mean the last, 10 years, where they're representing what they feel should be a level of respect for the squad that is not quite granted nationally. And I think that that's always been fair, to be quite honest. Zardos were never really that good. Lord knows I've gotten into various discussions with all sorts of Boston fans about what happened in that series last year. Went to 7 games, you might remember. They play on Christmas Day now, which means that it was officially some level of a rivalry. But I want to ask you this, Mike. Where do the Wizards rank in terms of impact? And I don't mean in terms of like how good their team is only there, but like when you think of fan bases, when you think of teams with some level of, panache, if you will, where are the Wizards in this scheme?
Panache? You mean national following? Because even when it comes to a local following, every time the Miami Heat play in that arena, it's almost a home game for the Miami Heat. And this is post-LeBron. It's not quite as bad as Atlanta or Brooklyn.
Mean every time they play where?
Whenever the Heat come to town, Heat fans take over that building. It's easy for Heat fans to take over the D.C. building, not quite to the level that it is in Brooklyn or Atlanta, but it's certainly top 3. So I'm not. You're really the only Wizards fan I know that's really passionate. In fact, I never heard the term Zardos until Clinton Yates started filling in.
Well, that goes for a lot of words in this world. But I think you're right, and I think that's reasonable. And that's where we're sort of getting to my point. I don't know that Zards Nation is ready to be on the national stage. I think the team is ready. I think the team is more ready than ever.
I will say, though, Clinton, there was sort of an NBA moment last year during the playoffs, that classic game that you had against the Celtics, John Wall climbing up on the desk, doing the sort of impression of Dwayne Wade, this is my house kind of deal. That's one of the great games in NBA playoff history, honestly. So much went into that. Social media blew up with it, and it's become a good rivalry. These teams don't like each other, and it's actually kind of chippy by today's NBA standards. So it absolutely deserves a marquee Christmas time slot. Even though I don't think that the Wizards get the nation really that excited, this rivalry does, because it's kind of chippy and because of that incredible playoff game they had.
I can live with that. And I'm glad you mentioned that, because I was at that game. And he jumped up on the scores table in the section that was right in front of me. And as somebody that's covered a lot of sports, sat in a lot of press boxes, stood on a lot of sidelines, I don't normally do a whole ton of cheering just as a matter of course through physical training now. But that game, your boy was standing on his chair, yelling and screaming right back at John Wall after the game. I was fired up.
What were you yelling back? Yes, it is your house. Is that?
I mean, I can't repeat what I was yelling on these airwaves. Absolutely not. A lot of curse words.
Was that the happiest the Zardos made you?
A lot of other words. The happiest
that
ever?
That might be the happiest the Zardos have ever made you.
Now that I think about it, that might be the pinnacle. But again, I don't really watch for wins and losses that much. You know what I'm saying? To me, it's like I've said this before. It's more about the communal experience and hanging out with my friends. There have probably been individual like dunks or just random things that occurred that over time made me happier. But that game, probably the most pumped up I've been, or psyched as we would say in D.C., after a win that I can remember in a really long time. Yeah, that's a good call. Huh. I hadn't thought about things that way.
This is you falling in love with the team all over again, Clinton.
I know, right? Am I going to go buy some tickets? Am I going to go get a package? That would mean I have to give Theodore money. Oh, I don't know if I'm going to do that. Anyway, I'm really excited about the season coming up in the NBA, and I do think that we talked to Michelle Beadle about this earlier in the program. For me, there's not going to be any letdown between the offseason and the regular season. You got all these people that'll get out here and tell you, oh, the NBA offseason is better than the actual basketball. Well, that to me just means you don't like basketball that much, which is fine. There's a lot of people that like the transactional element of sports more than they like the actual physical play. Whether or not they want to admit that to themselves or not is a different discussion.
But, Clinton, it's certainly a lot less predictable, and some people watch sports if their team doesn't have a chance for unpredictability. And that NBA regular season and sort of the postseason was a foregone conclusion because of the previous offseason.
Yeah, but at the same time, I mean, if that's only occupying two teams, all the other stuff matters. You look at the Western Conference between the Rockets, the Arugulas, and the Spurs. Okay, you might be able to sort of throw the Warriors out of that discussion, but everything else that happens with every other team still matters. They still got to play those games, and they still got to figure that out. We talked earlier about Lonzo Ball. People are going to be interested in that. They got to figure out whether or not he's going to be a good player.
There's a reason why that bad squad got so many national TV games.
Right. You talked about the Celtics and the Zardos rivalry. That's something, because you never know what can happen at the top. You never know if a James team could have some sort of injury, not necessarily to him, but to anybody that could just all of a sudden mean that they can't get it done. And somebody's going to find a way to slide into that second slot. You never know. And that's sort of why we do this. And for me, this offseason has jump-started me more into the beginning of the NBA season in a pre-Christmas sense than I can remember in a really, really long time. Because normally, as much of a fan of the league as I am, I'm on the same way. Start the season at Christmas. We'll deal with football until then. I'm Clinton Yates, filling in on the Dan Le Batard Show. Clinton Yates, filling in here on the Dan Le Batard Show. Today's Tuesday. You want to hit me up on the 1-800-Flowers Twitter feed? At Clinton Yates. Going to read some tweets here, Mike. At Clinton Yates. Really hope this guy is gone soon. Worst host Le Batard Show has ever had. Not even close. Bachelor talk. Are you serious? Hashtag FML.
You don't get the show.
Just because it's not the usual nonsense doesn't mean it's not in line with what the program does. At Clinton Yates, I like your idea of starting NBA season on Christmas, perhaps Thanksgiving weekend, so we can eat or watch for 4 uninterrupted days. That's a good tweet. At Clinton Yates, I can't say this word. Dang. That's too bad. Want to thank all our guests today. In reverse order, we talked to Lucas Yancey of Bachelorette fame and of Whaboom fame. That was an interesting conversation. Whabooming since the womb was my favorite part of that one, Mike. Michelle Beadle came on of Sports Nation. We talked about fantasy football. We talked about the fact that the NBA season has started. She obviously covers the NBA for ESPN. Eric Karabell came on, took a bunch of calls, fantasy football calls, did some actual sports radio, old school chalk talk stuff. Y'all called in with your questions. Some of you even tweeted in with your questions. So I appreciate that as well.
Did that get you into fantasy? Because I know you're sort of on no pun intended, you're sort of on your own fantasy island. You're without a league to call home. You don't know if you actually want to take it seriously or just join a league as a goof. But ESPN's doing a great job with this fantasy marathon. It looks fun on campus.
It does look fun. I want to be on campus right now as much as I want to be in a fantasy league. If I was there now, I would have already signed up for 3 leagues. I mean, I'm looking at Field right now, Cousin Field. He's wearing his Yaters Gonna Yate t-shirt, and there's a lemonade stand behind him. This looks excellent. I would love to be there. Alas. I got a headline for you, though, Mike. Cardi B nabs highest charting Hot 100 single by female MC since Nicki Minaj.
She's in the top 10.
Tell the people how many times you've listened to Bodak Yellow since yesterday.
I've listened to Bodak Yellow 40 times. I'm not even kidding. It's a legitimately great song. It's catchy. The red bottom shoes. I'm here for it. I'm here for every lyric that I can actually say legally. I'm here for that song, and it gets you right from the start. It is an aggressive start to a track.
You mentioned that you're going to work out after the show. Is Bodak Yellow on the
That's
playlist?
on the playlist, man.
See, I figured. Just trying to help you all out here in these streets. I got all you old heads in my mentions talking about the beats are trash, her lyrics are garbage, yada yada. You just don't understand because you're too obsessed with finding what we like to call the spiritual lyrical miracle. Not everybody likes that hip hop, and not everybody wants only that in their diet of programming when it comes to songs.
You know what it reminds me of, Clinton?
Yes.
And it reminds me of how Panda by Designer took over the world.
Banger.
Everybody knew what they were getting in for. It's a novelty track, yes, absolutely. But it had a run where you demanded the DJ play it at parties. And I feel like that's what's going on with Bodak Yellow.
Thank you. I'm glad that we have come to an understanding on this.
And Designer's kind of a punchline now. He's crazy. We knew what Designer was when we first met him. We knew what we were signing up for, and I think we know what we're signing up for with Cardi B.
But that's where Cardi B differs from Designer. Cardi B was in these reality show I'm a Star streets long before Designer ever was. Designer was in high school. Cardi B is a legitimate star. That's why I'm such a fan of her work.
This is kind of like when Rick Springfield had Jesse's Girl. Rick Springfield was already famous, and then you realize, oh, great musician too.
That went right over my head. Although I do know Jesse's Girl.
Well, Rick Springfield, what was it, General Hospital, Roy? You're old. You know, you got an old soul.
I'm not that
Well,
old.
he was a soap opera star. He was famous for being a soap opera star. Now, I don't watch a show that Cardi B is on.
Right.
But you're telling me, I guess Love and Hip Hop is the new General Hospital.
That's a good comparison.
Okay.
We are building bridges here on the Batard Show. Should we? I don't want to ask a crass question. Is Rick Springfield? You know what? Never mind.
Still with us?
Yes.
Yes. He was in True Detective Season 2.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Should we get Rick Springfield on the program?
Oh, we've had him once booked, and he did a DeMario on us.
Ooh.
So I've totally soured on
That's
Rick
not
Springfield.
good. That's not good. Just for those of you who plan on tuning in to Bachelor in Paradise tonight, the second night of the second night premiere, 2-night premiere. Shout out to my homie Christophe who reminded me of that. I know our lead-ins were so great, but I hope you'll check it out tonight on ABC. I'm Clinton Yates. It's the Dan Le Batard Show. ESPN Radio. I'm here all week, kiddos.
You can listen to the Dan Le Batard